No one told you life was going to be this way. Yeah, we all know how it goes. But for many of us, Friends wasn't just a sitcom. It wasn't just laughter, coffee, or clapping hands by a fountain. For some of us, it was survival. There was a time when turning on that TV felt like opening a door to safety. 6 people around a coffee table, jokes landing perfectly, laughter bubbling through the speakers, and suddenly, everything outside didn't hurt so much anymore. Because in Friends, people could mess up, fall in love with the wrong person, go broke, and still have a place that would welcome them the next morning. Central Perk was always warm. New York was always forgiving. And Chandler's sarcasm somehow always made the world feel okay again. But when you peel away the laughter, something deeper hides beneath. Behind those perfectly timed jokes were broken hearts, secret battles, and creative choices that almost destroyed everything. So today, on DCV DHAS's Classic View, let's pull back the curtain. Let's look at 8 shocking, strange, and painfully human truths behind Friends, the show that changed television forever. Number 8. The fountain that never existed. It's the first image that comes to mind when anyone mentions Friends. 6 young faces glowing under soft lights, splashing water, laughter bouncing through the night. That fountain, it became more than just scenery. It became a symbol of what the show meant to millions. Warmth, safety, friendship, and the illusion that no matter what happened, these 6 people would always meet again under those city lights. For years, viewers all over the world believed that fountain was somewhere in New York. Tourists landed at JFK with maps in hand, asking taxi drivers, "Can you take us to the Friends fountain?" They searched Central Park, city squares, hidden gardens, but the truth was stranger and simpler. That fountain didn't exist in New York at all. It was never surrounded by skyscrapers, never felt the chill of a Manhattan autumn. It stood quietly on the Warner Brothers backlot in Burbank, California, thousands of miles away. Built entirely for the camera, it was a perfectly crafted illusion. A few pipes, a pool, some strategically placed lights, and the magic of television. The crew filmed the sequence after midnight, long after the lot had gone silent. The laughter we hear in the intro wasn't real laughter echoing across a city. It was recorded sound, layered over a scene designed to feel like New York without ever being there. But maybe that's what made it so powerful. Because Friends was never trying to show the real New York, it showed us the New York we wished existed. A cleaner, safer, warmer version of life, where rent was somehow always paid, friendship never broke, and every night ended with people who understood you. It wasn't a city made of bricks and traffic, it was a city built from hope, laughter, and the kind of belonging that real life rarely gives. Over the years, fans kept searching. They'd walk the real streets, convinced they'd just missed a turn. But no map could lead them there, because the fountain wasn't a place, it was a memory, a dream projected onto a screen. And maybe that's why the image still stays with us even after decades. Because the Friends fountain isn't about where it was filmed. It's about what it felt like to watch it. That brief, perfect illusion that somewhere in the world, 6 friends were laughing. Life was simple, and everything just for a moment was okay. Number 7. Matt LeBlanc auditioned for Joey with only $11 in his pocket. When you think of Joey Tribbiani, what do you see? A charming grin, a carefree swagger, a man who walks into every room believing the world will eventually bend his way. He's the friend who eats pizza at 2 a.m. without guilt, the one who flirts with reckless confidence, and the one who, somehow, always lands on his feet even when he shouldn't. But behind that easy smile was an actor who didn't have the luxury of carelessness. Because when Matt LeBlanc walked into his audition for Friends, he had only $11 left to his name. Not 11 for the weekend, not 11 for gas money, $11 for everything. His fridge was empty, his car barely had fuel, and he didn't know where the next meal would come from if this audition failed. Imagine that moment. You've spent years chasing a dream that keeps slipping away. You've heard no so many times that the word barely stings anymore. You walk into a room full of bright lights, executives, and scripts, knowing that this might be your last chance, not metaphorically, but literally. One wrong line, one nervous mistake, and you're back to zero. Matt LeBlanc later admitted that before Friends, he had so little money that he'd sometimes fix his own teeth with DIY tools just to save on dental bills. He'd go to auditions, hungry, pretending to be full of energy when he hadn't eaten properly in days. When he entered the Friends casting room, he wasn't Joey Tribbiani, yet he was a man standing at the edge, trying to laugh his way out of fear. And yet, something incredible happened. Instead of faking confidence, he leaned into something rawer, that real desperation mixed with charm. That exact balance of innocence and survival became Joey. Because Joey wasn't rich either. Joey was a struggling actor, living off hope, pizza, and borrowed money. Joey believed life would work out, not because it always did, but because he couldn't afford to believe otherwise. When LeBlanc got the call that he'd landed the role, the first thing he did wasn't to celebrate or buy something glamorous. He simply went out and bought a proper meal. Not champagne, not new clothes, just a meal because for the first time in a long while, he could eat without counting every dollar. It's a simple image, but powerful. A man who had been starving for both food and recognition finally allowed himself to breathe. And that small act, that quiet meal, carried into Joey's performance for the next 10 years. That's why Joey's optimism feels real, not cartoonish. Because underneath the laughter was someone who had truly known what it meant to have nothing. At the same time, somewhere across town, Courteney Cox was using her first paycheck to buy a car, a smart, stable investment for someone already thinking about tomorrow. LeBlanc and Cox entered Friends from two different places in life, one still climbing out of survival mode, the other securing her footing, and that difference subtly bled into the characters we saw on screen. Monica, the planner. Joey, the dreamer. One always afraid of losing control, the other always trusting that life would somehow catch him. Maybe that's why, when Joey eats like there's no tomorrow, or smiles even when broke, it feels so human. Because that confidence wasn't a performance, it was gratitude. The gratitude of someone who once stood in a casting hallway with just $11, one dream, and a prayer that the next door he walked through might finally stay open. So when we laugh at Joey's silliness, maybe we're laughing at something deeper, the part of ourselves that still believes life can turn around. Even when the wallet's empty, even when hope feels ridiculous. Because for Matt LeBlanc and for Joey Tribbiani, it actually did. Number 6. Courteney Cox's hidden grief before filming Rachel's birth scene. There's a moment in Friends that almost every fan remembers: the birth of Emma. Rachel lies in a hospital bed, surrounded by her friends, waiting for her baby to arrive. The room is filled with light, laughter, and that warm chaos that made Friends feel like family. Jokes fly back and forth. Chandler tries to be funny. Joey looks confused. Ross is nervous, and everyone seems so alive, so happy. It's one of the show's most joyful scenes. A celebration of new life, of love, of friendship enduring through every stage of adulthood. But what the audience never saw was that one of the women standing in that room was carrying a grief so deep, so raw, that it could have broken anyone else. Just one day before filming that scene, Courteney Cox suffered a miscarriage in real life. Less than 24 hours before she was scheduled to walk onto that set, smile, deliver jokes, and help bring a fictional baby into the world, she had lost her own. Think about that for a second. The lights, the laughter, the makeup chair, the script in her hands. Every line she said that day, every smile she forced was wrapped around a pain she couldn't share. There are no hints of it on camera. She doesn't falter. She doesn't break. She plays Monica bright, supportive, excited, naming Rachel's baby Emma, beaming like a proud aunt. And the audience, millions of us, laughed and cried with her, never realizing that behind that joy was unimaginable loss. Courteney has spoken, quietly and rarely, about how much she wanted to be a mother during the years of Friends. She and her then-husband, David Arquette, faced multiple struggles trying to conceive. The irony, the almost cruel symmetry was that the character she played, Monica Geller, was written as someone desperate to start a family. So the woman and the characters shared the same dream, the same longing, and at that moment the same heartbreak. But Courteney didn't ask for sympathy. She didn't call in sick. She showed up. Because that's what professionalism sometimes demands, to carry your pain silently, while the world expects you to make them laugh. In that hospital scene, when Monica looks at Rachel's baby and smiles, there's something else behind that expression, something deeper than the script could ever describe. It's the face of someone who understands what it means to love something that life took away too soon. When you rewatch that episode now, knowing this truth, the laughter hits differently. The warmth of that moment carries a quiet ache, the realization that behind the illusion of sitcom happiness were real people fighting private battles. Courteney Cox held herself together that day, not just for the camera, but maybe for the same reason so many of us keep moving through grief. Because sometimes pretending to be okay is the only way to survive. And in that scene, Friends became more than just television. It became a portrait of the human condition, joy and pain existing side by side, unseen but inseparable. A reminder that behind every smile we fall in love with on screen, there might be a story the world never got to see. Number 5. Joey's white dog statue wasn't just a prop. Every Friends fan remembers it, that bizarre, oversized white ceramic dog sitting proudly in Joey's apartment. The first time you see it, you probably laugh. It's ridiculous. It's gaudy. It's the kind of thing someone buys the second they get rich and have no idea what to do with their money. On screen, it was classic Joey, a walking contradiction between charm and chaos. But what if I told you that dog wasn't a joke at all? That it wasn't designed by the prop team or added for comedy? That it was, in fact, a real piece of someone's personal life, and that it carried a story far more human than anyone ever realized? Before Jennifer Anniston became the Rachel Green we all know, before the fame, before the magazine covers, before the world decided she was America's sweetheart, she was just another struggling actress trying to make it in Hollywood. And like most dreamers in Los Angeles, she was surrounded by friends who believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. One of those friends gave her a strange gift, a large, white, porcelain dog. Not expensive, not beautiful. But it came with a message. For good luck, keep this with you, and something great will happen. Years later, when Friends became a hit, and the production team was searching for the perfect piece of absurdity to decorate Joey's apartment, something loud, something wrong, something funny, Jennifer Aniston remembered that dog. She offered to bring it to set, just for a laugh. And that's how the dog entered Friends. Not as a prop, but as a symbol of survival, a personal token of faith, brought from Jennifer's real life into the fictional world of Joey Tribbiani. What no one expected was how the audience would react. That ridiculous statue became instantly iconic. It fit Joey so perfectly, a man who spent his first big paycheck not on stability, but on something that made him feel rich, feel proud, feel like he'd finally made it. The white dog wasn't just an object in the room anymore. It was a piece of both of them. Joey and Jennifer, frozen in ceramic, standing tall in the middle of their success stories. From that point on, the writers decided to keep it in Joey's apartment permanently. And over time, the dog turned into an unspoken symbol of what Friends really represented. Because that's what the show always did. It blended truth and fiction so seamlessly that we never realized how much of the actors' real lives were hidden inside the laughter. That white dog stood quietly in the background of so many episodes, witnessing everything. The failed auditions, the fights, the laughter, the goodbyes. It was part of Joey's journey, yes, but also part of Jennifer Aniston's. A reminder that success often begins with something small and strange that someone once gave you out of love. So, the next time you rewatch Friends and spot that absurdly shiny dog in the corner of Joey's apartment, remember this: you're not looking at a prop. You're looking at a piece of Hollywood history that began in a tiny apartment as a gift between two struggling artists, long before the world ever clapped to the rhythm of "I'll Be There For You." It's a perfect metaphor for what Friends really was. A mix of laughter, luck, and a lot of love, all built from the kind of tiny, personal details that only real life can give. Number 4. Matthew Perry. filmed Friends while fighting addiction. For a decade, Chandler Bing was the lifeline of Friends. The moment a scene began to dip into seriousness, Chandler would appear fast, funny, brilliant, and self-aware. His sarcasm could cut tension like a knife. His timing was perfect. He made sadness lighter, awkwardness charming, and failure funny. To millions of viewers, Chandler was safety. He was the friend who made everything okay again. But behind the laughter, behind every joke that made an audience roar, the man playing him, Matthew Perry, was slipping further into a private darkness that few people could have imagined. During the peak years of Friends, Perry was silently fighting a brutal addiction to prescription drugs and alcohol. It didn't start as chaos, it began with an accident, a jet ski mishap, painkillers prescribed to help him heal. And like so many who never see it coming, he got trapped in the undertow. Soon, the pills stopped being about pain relief. They became about survival, about silence, about numbness. And then they became everything. In interviews years later, Matthew admitted something that still breaks hearts to hear. "I don't remember 3 years of filming Friends. Not one single frame." Think about that. One of the brightest stars in television history, the face of one of the most watched shows in the world, lived through entire seasons of his own success as a blur. He would show up to set, deliver lines that would make millions of people laugh, and then go home to a quiet war inside his own mind. If you look closely, you can see it. In some seasons, Chandler is thin, alarmingly thin. In others, he looks puffy and exhausted. Those weren't character choices. They were side effects of dependency, of withdrawal, of a body trying to hold itself together while the world demanded laughter. And yet, the magic of Matthew Perry was this: he never let his pain make the audience suffer. Even when his life was unraveling off-screen, he made sure Chandler stayed whole. He turned his insecurity into humor. He turned the fear of being broken into perfectly timed sarcasm. Chandler's jokes weren't just jokes anymore. They were armor. There's one moment, years later, that Matthew Perry himself reflected on. People would come up to me and say, "Chandler's my favorite. He helped me through depression." And I wanted to tell them, he was helping me through mine too. That's what makes his story both beautiful and devastating. He gave millions of people comfort while he was quietly drowning. He made us laugh while barely surviving himself. And maybe that's why, when you rewatch Friends now, something feels different about Chandler. You can see the pain hidden between the lines, the way he uses humor, not just to entertain, but to protect himself. It's what makes him so human. Matthew Perry once said, "If you see me on Friends, and I'm overweight, it's alcohol. If I'm thin, it's pills. If I look healthy, it's when I'm sober." Every frame of Chandler Bing's life on screen is a record of a man trying to heal. He fought the battle for decades, sometimes winning, sometimes losing, but always returning to the light, even briefly, to make us laugh again. And maybe that's the legacy that outlives everything else. That Matthew Perry taught us what it means to keep showing up, to stand in front of a camera, a crowd, or even your own demons, and still find the strength to say something funny. He made pain sound like comedy, and in doing so, he made millions of people feel a little less alone. Number 3. Joey owed Chandler nearly $120,000 over 10 seasons. If you've watched Friends enough times, you already know this. Chandler Bing and Joey Tribbiani weren't just roommates. They were brothers, the kind that destiny gives you when life decides blood isn't enough. Their friendship was messy, hilarious, and strangely profound. They fought, they pranked, they hugged, and they forgave. But behind all that laughter and those foosball matches, there was something constant, a quiet act of love that almost nobody noticed. Chandler was always taking care of Joey. Joey was the dreamer, the struggling actor, chasing fame with more heart than logic. Chandler was the realist, the man with the stable job, the paycheck, and the instinct to protect. They were two sides of the same coin, one reaching for the stars, the other trying to make sure rent got paid on time. Over the course of the show, Chandler covered Joey's share of the rent, his food, his headshots, his auditions, his acting classes, and even his pet projects, literally and figuratively. It became a running joke. Joey would mess something up. Chandler would fix it. Joey would forget a bill. Chandler would pay it. But what fans didn't realize until the numbers were crunched years later is just how much that friendship cost, literally. According to fan analyses, scripts, and episode dialogue, Joey ended up owing Chandler nearly $120,000 by the end of the series. $120,000. And Chandler never asked for a cent back. Not once. Not a hint of resentment. Not even a sarcastic jab, and this was Chandler Bing we're talking about. Why? Because underneath the jokes, there was something rare, a love that didn't need balance sheets. Chandler saw Joey's struggle and chose empathy over judgment. He believed in him when no one else did. And in a world that constantly measures worth in money, Chandler measured it in loyalty. Think about the episodes that showed this side quietly. When Joey finally got an acting gig, Chandler celebrated like it was his own victory. When Joey got his big paycheck, Chandler didn't cash in on the debt. He smiled and said, "That's great, man." End way in 22. End quote. Because it was never about repayment. There's even a scene that captures it perfectly. Joey, realizing how much Chandler had done for him, writes him a heartfelt letter and gives him a hug that lasts longer than the joke should allow. And for a moment, Friends stops being funny and starts being real. That's the power of their friendship. Chandler didn't just give Joey money. He gave him the space to dream. He allowed Joey to fail, to fall, and to get back up again without shame. In a way, that's what real friendship looks like. Not the kind built on equal contributions, but on unconditional faith. Because sometimes, we all need a Chandler. Someone who sees the version of us that hasn't arrived yet and invests in it anyway. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we get to be that Chandler for someone else. So when you re-watch Friends and see Joey sitting comfortably in that recliner, pizza in hand, laughing at something stupid, remember, that comfort, that laughter, that freedom, it was all made possible because someone loved him enough to believe he'd eventually make it. And isn't that what Friends was really about? Not who paid the bills, but who stayed, even when you couldn't. Number 2. Matt LeBlanc's quiet crush on Jennifer Anniston. There's something special about watching Friends, how 6 people could sit around a coffee table, tease each other endlessly, and yet somehow make every glance, every smile, feel so effortlessly real. But what if, behind one of those easy smiles, there was a quiet truth that never made it into the script? Let's rewind to the early days before the global fame, before the million-dollar paychecks, when Friends was just 6 actors hoping the world would fall in love with them. That's when Matt LeBlanc, the man who played Joey Tribbiani, our charming, goofy, how you doin' ladies' man, had a small, quiet crush on Jennifer Anniston. Not a tabloid story, not a secret romance. Just something simple, human, the kind of crush that reminds us these icons were people long before they became our screensavers. Years later, in an interview for Friends, till the end, LeBlanc admitted it softly. "At the beginning, I had a little crush on Jen, but I think everyone did. And honestly, he wasn't wrong." Jennifer Aniston's energy in those early years was magnetic. Rachel Green wasn't just a character, she was a phenomenon. The laugh, the hair, the optimism, the way she could walk into a room and instantly change the mood, it wasn't acting. It was something deeper. But what's beautiful about this revelation isn't that there was a crush, it's how it didn't change anything. The cast of Friends wasn't built on sparks or scandals. It was built on trust. Matt never crossed the line. He didn't flirt his way into headlines or let feelings complicate the work. He showed up, stayed professional, and turned that chemistry into something timeless. Real friendship. And maybe that's why the bond between Joey and Rachel worked so perfectly on screen. There's that light teasing, the warmth, the subtle glances, but never too far, never breaking the balance. Because somewhere in the background, There was a man who admired her genuinely and respected her even more. When you rewatch those scenes, Joey comforting Rachel when she's sad, Joey cheering for her wins, Joey backing off when he realizes his feelings could hurt the group, you can feel the quiet maturity behind the performance. That's Matt LeBlanc, the actor, not Joey the character, showing what love looks like when it knows its place. And maybe that's what makes Friends different from every other show of its time. It wasn't powered by gossip. It was powered by respect. The same kind of respect that made 6 people walk onto that set every day for 10 years and never let ego, envy, or rumor tear the chemistry apart. Matt's confession doesn't expose some secret scandal, it reveals something pure. It shows us that connection, admiration, and even quiet affection can exist in the same space as professionalism, laughter, and lifelong friendship. And that's why Friends lasted. Because behind all the jokes and sarcasm, behind the sets and scripts, there were 6 people who actually cared about each other. So next time you see Joey smile at Rachel, or crack a line just to make her laugh, remember, it wasn't just acting. It was a little bit of truth, hidden behind the world's most famous sitcom grin. Number 1. How you doing? The 4 words that define Joey Tribbiani and an entire generation. Some lines in television come and go, forgotten as soon as the credits roll. But then there are those rare, lightning strike phrases that outgrow the show itself. The ones that sneak into our daily speech, echo through decades, and become part of who we are. For Friends, that moment belongs to just 4 simple words. A tilted head, a smirk that's half confidence, half charm. A voice that drips New York swagger and innocent hope. And then, how you doing? When Joey Tribbiani said it, the world laughed not because it was smooth, but because it wasn't. It was the kind of line that should have fallen flat in real life. It was cheesy, exaggerated, and completely ridiculous. And yet, somehow, it worked. Because Joey wasn't just saying it to impress, he believed in it. That was his secret weapon. He'd look at someone, flash that smile, and genuinely think, yeah, this might actually work. That sincerity, that boyish, hopeful belief made the audience fall in love with him instantly. But here's what makes "How You Doin'" more than just a punchline. It was never really about flirting. It was a window into Joey's soul. See, Joey wasn't the smartest guy in the group. He wasn't rich, or deeply introspective, or even particularly responsible. But what he did have was courage, the courage to try, to risk embarrassment, to put himself out there again and again without fear. And that's what those 4 words meant. They were a celebration of optimism. Every "how you doin'" was Joey saying to the world, I might fail, but I'm gonna have fun trying. And maybe that's why it caught on far beyond the show. It became the anthem of a generation raised on self-doubt and sarcasm. A reminder that confidence doesn't have to come from perfection. It can come from simply believing you've got a shot. Even TV Guide recognized it, ranking "How You Doin'" as #4 on its list of the 20 greatest TV catchphrases of all time back in 2005. Think about that. 4 words from a fictional guy who couldn't even remember his own lines in auditions, now engraved in pop culture history forever. And the best part? Matt LeBlanc, the man behind Joey, never planned it to be iconic. He delivered it with a playful tone, just trying to make the crew laugh during rehearsal. But once the cameras rolled, and that line hit the audience, the reaction was electric. Laughter, cheers, clapping, that instant connection every actor dreams of. It was born in that moment. Raw, spontaneous, perfect. Today, decades later, you can walk into a coffee shop anywhere in the world and say, "How you doing?" And someone somewhere will smile. Not because they think you're hitting on them, but because those words carry memories. They remind us of a time when sitcoms made us feel safe, when Thursday nights meant comfort, and when a man with a goofy grin taught us that confidence could be funny, lovable, and even heroic in its own way. That's the power of Joey's line. 4 words that captured everything Friends stood for: warmth, humor, resilience, and the belief that no matter how hard life gets, it's okay to laugh and try again. So next time you're feeling low, remember, Joey. Tilt your head, smile just a little, and whisper those legendary words, "How you doing?" Because sometimes a simple phrase can remind the whole world and yourself that life's still worth smiling at. The final reflection: why Friends still feels like home. By now, you've seen what lies behind the laughter, the untold stories, the fragile hearts, the near misses, and the quiet truths that made Friends more than just a sitcom. It wasn't simply a TV show. It was a mirror reflecting everything we longed for in life: belonging, hope, laughter, and second chances. Behind every punchline was a person trying to hold it together. Behind every scene of joy was someone fighting their own silent battle. And yet, through all of it, the world they created, that small Manhattan apartment, that warm cafe, that circle of six, became our own safe place. Friends taught us that you can lose jobs, money, or even love, and still find your way back to the people who make life bearable. It reminded us that sarcasm can be a shield, that laughter can be healing, and that being flawed doesn't make you broken, it just makes you human. Maybe that's why, decades later, we still return to that world, to the sound of that fountain, that familiar orange couch, and those first guitar chords of "I'll Be There For You." Because when those notes play, time stops. We're not just watching a sitcom. We're revisiting a piece of who we were when life was simpler and the world still felt soft around the edges. And even now, when the world outside feels heavier, darker, lonelier, Friends still holds its light. It still says, "Come in, sit down, it's okay to laugh again." That's the magic television rarely captures anymore. The power to make millions of strangers feel like a family. So the next time you rewatch Friends, don't just look for the jokes. Look for the heart. Look for the courage it took to keep smiling when things were hard. Look for the quiet moments, the hugs, the apologies, the tiny gestures where real love existed behind fictional names. Because long after the last episode faded, the message remained the same. You're never truly alone, not as long as you have your people. And maybe that's the real meaning of "I'll be there for you." This is DCVDHASS Classic View. And if this story made you see Friends a little differently, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because some stories aren't just meant to be watched, they're meant to be felt. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and never stop finding the beauty in the classics.